Hello everyone, it is the end of October 2018, so it's time for my monthly review of DCS World War II. In this review we go through the various patches, changes, updates and announcements to the various World War II modules that exist in DCS, and then we look at some of the prospective and projected work that Eagle Dynamics have announced for the future. So first, to look at updates, it's actually been a silent month with respect to the existing modules. I could find no changes to any of the existing modules themselves, no changes to the map, and no changes or additions of new assets. So for the moment, we are basically still playing the exact same configuration that we had at the end of September. This is a little bit frustrating for those of us who have some long-standing bug reports with existing modules, and we just have to play the waiting game, hoping that Eagle Dynamics will get around to resolving those in the near future. On the positive side, the lack of updates means that the video will be nice and short, so we're going to move on to announcements. There are three major announcements that we had in the last month. The first is Eagle Dynamics publishing some more information about work on the damage model, and this is some of the most detailed stuff we've seen to date. We'll discuss that shortly. Secondly, it was the announcement that the Focke-Wulf 190A8 will be the next World War II player-flown aircraft to be released. This is a bit of a surprise. And thirdly is the current/imminent/only just released campaign for the Spitfire in single player, which we'll have a brief look at the end of the video. So, announcement number one. On the 19th of October, in the weekly news updates, we saw a post with a brief description of the work that is being on the damage model for the World War II aircraft, and we also saw some screenshots. I'm going to read through the first paragraph or first few sentences of description about the damage model. It's a little bit, let's say, poorly written, but I'm hoping we can work our way through and try and understand or explain what's going on here. So they've said the following: we recognize that an important aspect to improve in DCS world is more realistic damage modeling in regards to localized effects, visual effects, effect on hit components, and type of weapon impact. Regarding the latter, the new damage model will be based on two types of weapon impact: penetrating impact and proximity impact. This provides us with three primary weapon effects on a unit: penetrating, in brackets projectiles, volumetric pressure wave, in brackets high explosive, and volumetric shrapnel. This last effect allows weapon casing fragments to be tracked as unique objects entering the unit. This is not modelled in our current damage model, but it will provide great improvement to aircraft and later ground unit damage. Okay, that is the full sentence, and there's a whole lot of sort of sub-clauses and lists embedded within all this. I want to pull out what I think the key and most interesting parts of this are. Normally in these sims, we expect at a minimum that the penetrating effect of different rounds will be modelled. And I think most games probably do this already. When a round hits an aircraft, they make an assumption about how far that round will penetrate, what parts of the aircraft will be knocked out, and then the pilot will obviously feel the effect in response. This is pretty normal stuff. There are varying different levels of granularity or resolution with how they do this. Some sims go right down to every little piece being potentially affected, and others just have large hitboxes over significant sections of the aircraft, and others have a kind of health bar system where you just keep plugging away until the health bar reaches zero. DCS look to be going down the right path with this, which is to model loads of interior pieces of the aeroplane, to give them each some kind of strength value, to give a bullet a certain force value, and when the force meets the piece, then the piece is affected. The second piece of weapon effect they talk about is volumetric and pressure wave. Now, this is really interesting because here they're talking about essentially high explosives and explosions going off near an aircraft, generating a pressure wave, and then the pressure wave having an effect on certain aircraft components. So I presume each component is going to be tagged with some kind of value which says how sensitive is this component to pressure, and then when an explosion happens, the pressure will be modeled, and those parts, if they are in the right proximity, will be affected by the pressure wave. This is really nice to see. This isn't done by a whole lot of sims, but it's certainly very good that they're going down this path, and it's an absolute necessity if you ask me. The third one of these three is really quite interesting, and I think goes beyond where all, or at least most, other sims have gone before. And this is where they're talking about modeling and tracking the casing fragments from fragmentation weapons. Thinking about a flak burst. From a flak burst, you've got the pressure wave, which we've just discussed, but you've also got all the pieces of that shell's casing, which will then fly around in the sky. From the detail here, it looks like DCS are suggesting they can track those pieces of casing, and then they can also model them as impact effects on aircraft parts. This is really nice. This is something quite new, I think. And if they really put all these three things together into one damage model, this will be a massive advance. We can have a brief look now at the screenshots they provided. There are two. There's one for the Focke-Wulf 190. This is the D9, the current Focke-Wulf. And then there is a screenshot for the P-51 Mustang. The screenshots themselves show a large number of 3D parts. And in the Focke-Wulf screenshot in particular, the parts are color-coded. I don't think the color coding is designed to show like-for-like damage sensitivity. I think it's just there so that you can visually separate all the different pieces. But take a look at these screenshots. You can see how many 3D parts and how detailed they are. The location and the placement of these 3D parts seems to be nice and small. The hitboxes are of a reasonable size, and that's really nice. I don't like it when damage models have hitboxes that are essentially the entire aircraft or even go beyond the limits of the actual aircraft. These screenshots do look kind of similar to some screenshots we saw a couple of years ago or 18 months ago for the Spitfire. My understanding is that the damage model for the Spitfire has been largely complete for some time. However, it's not been implemented in-game because they're waiting for all the other Warbirds to have similar damage models. So I suspect that once they are all done, we'll see them implemented at the same time. We have no idea how long that will take. It's just one of those 2 weeks things that we just have to wait for. The screenshots themselves don't show specific control surfaces. I saw a couple of questions from people about why control surfaces weren't shown. However, the description in the update itself says that control surfaces are modeled in the damage model. They just don't appear to be in these specific screenshots. So there we go. That's something really exciting to look forward to. This is one of the major things that holds back DCS World War II. If this gets implemented in a reasonable timescale, I think this is going to be a real boon to those of us who play DCS World War II. Earlier in the month, on the 5th of October, we got given quite the surprise when Eagle Dynamics suddenly, in a weekly update, announced that the next Warbird coming to DCS World will in fact be the Focke-Wulf 190 A8 Würger. Now this is, for me, one of the best decisions Eagle Dynamics have made in some time with respect to the Warbirds, and this A8 model will be the perfect counterpart to the Spitfire 9 that we currently have. They were both in service in pretty decent numbers during the same time periods, and this will also help us more accurately present the post-invasion and pre-invasion air combat scenarios over the Normandy coastline. A couple of screenshots were posted of work-in-progress cockpits, and the cockpits are quite far along actually. They look for all intents and purposes to be mostly, or if not completely, finished. Texturing is done, all the instruments are in place. I don't see any major gaps or holes in the models. couple of people noticed that the lighting looked quite ugly, and I think that's because they didn't actually have the full lighting model turned on when they were preparing these screenshots. They are only in 1080p, unfortunately, so we can't zoom in right down and have a look at every little last nth degree of detail. They are just fairly low, medium resolution screenshots, but they look very similar to what we would expect from DCS Warbird models. So I expect this aircraft to be well modeled and a lot of fun to fly, and it's really good to see that it fits with the other historical aircraft from the appropriate period. As usual with these things though, due to the many number of variants and sub-variants of these World War II aircraft, there are still a lot of questions about exactly what configuration this particular model will have. Even within the A8 variation of the Focke-Wulf 190, there are a number of sub-variants, field modifications, weapon changes, armor configurations, and all sorts of things which individual units or pilots may have had different from other aircraft. So we can never really know exactly what we're going to get until it is served up on our plates. The final announcement that we've had in October is that the Big Show campaign by Reflected Simulations has been released. This is a single-player campaign which contains 12 missions, and it is for the Spitfire Mark 9. The 12 missions are set from April 1943 through to July 1944. That represents 14 months of the war, so it's a little bit surprising at first to find out there are 12 missions in this campaign, but I'm guessing that they've probably distilled the combat highlights of that 14 months into those 12 missions, rather than having us fly mission after mission of cross-channel flights with potentially not engaging the enemy. The campaign is apparently based on Pierre Klosterman's experiences during this period. I do in fact have Pierre Klosterman's autobiography, which has been subject to some criticism with respect to its historical accuracy at times, but that's a whole other issue. I will not be flying this campaign on the channel unless there is significant demand for me to do so. At the moment, I'm waiting for some bugs in the Spitfire to be fixed before I purchase any more content. It is interesting to note on that topic that the release video appears to have a much cleaner looking armoured glass gun sight than we currently have in the sim. It's possible that means the armoured glass bug with the fluoro green has been fixed, but we are yet to see if that is the case. So thanks for watching this month's World War II updates video. As I said at the beginning, a bit light on changes to the existing modules and assets we have, but a couple of major announcements, and it's a bit of a waiting game now to see how and when they will be implemented. As usual, happy hunting everyone, and I will see you up there.